You done fucked up right now.
Slick with it.
I see what I'm saying.
I thought.
No, so, you know what I'm saying? You done fucked up now, you know that now.
Yeah,
No, you done fucked up.
Okay, not sure how this is evidence of anything. Those are images of Tanwet Amani's tomb, and that's the 25th dynasty started by Taharqa of Nubia, who conquered Egypt. He's the last Nubian pharaoh of Egypt. You know, Tanwet Amani lived from 664 BC to 656 BC. This wouldn't be any type of representation of most of the history of Egypt or early Nubia. So beautiful images, but they don't really make a point.
I don't even recall making any reference to a history dealing with this. I thought it was artistical singularity, but I guess you got it wrong.
One can also note that the limb ratios, the limb proportions of Egyptians are tropical.
As Dr. Keita has stated, statues aren't always reliable in telling you the true features of a person because they might be using social conventions in the statue. But if you're going to argue based on statues' looks, don't complain when I show you exactly what the statue proportions really look like. Using the imagery you presented and superimposing it on different images of Queen Hatshepsut, we can see what she probably looked like, not fitting your image.
Thanks for the lesson in graphics art, even though I'm a graphics artist. Riddle me this, did I ever, period, in any conversation, if you show it to me, tell you to go by and do a comparison of the graphic art of Hatshepsut and the statue art? The answer to that would be no, because I did not mention that one time during any debate that we ever had.
Are black. The real Egyptians are black because the real Egyptians, they are real Africans. So those people in Lower Egypt, you see in Cairo, Alexandria, and Falahin area, they were mixed between Turkish, Mamluks, French, English, Romans.
And we are just supposed to take the word of an unknown, supposed doctor and historian because he is Nubian. Black racialists exist in Africa as well.
So those people who come to attack Egypt in that time, they couldn't come to Upper Egypt, to the south, which we still have the same color, our dark color or black color. So they couldn't mix with us.
Why would I take the word of some unknown man, claimed to be a doctor, but with no references to his expertise, his education, or his research, when I can listen to a recognized expert in the field, like Dr. Shamarka Keita of Howard University?
First of all, let's look at Sal Assassin's ignorance. Alright, Dr. Muhammad does tours in Egypt. He's Egyptian. He writes, and he's a historian. Now, if you listen to Schumacher like you said you do, then you would already know that he tells you to critique everything that comes through.
That's to critique what geneticists term population historians have become. I can tell you that recently you can find in the genetics literature very interesting claims based on some very old books. For example, a few years ago, an article was written about Senegambia, mitochondrial DNA, in which it was stated that the Fulani, the Fulbe, who are an African people who were found from Senegal to basically Eritrea today, so across the Sahel belt, that they're descendants of the Hyksos. Now, this is from some old books that they got someplace. They clearly didn't read modern linguistics. They clearly didn't talk to modern Africanists. They didn't do it. They got published in the American Journal of Human Genetics. And what happened? You say, well, how did this happen? It happens because the people doing genetics, the editors of those journals, are more concerned about the techniques of genetics. And they just assume that the, quote, soft part, they got that right. But they don't give those articles to other people to referee equally as strong because they don't think that what Africanists have to say is important and what African linguists have to say is important. This is a very harsh judgment on my part. Some of this has changed, but I have the hard evidence that this is true. I have the hard evidence that this is true.
Are you seriously trying to use E1, B1, B1 to try to make a case for a genetically united and exclusively black Africa, and I see you're trying to claim Dravidians as well.
That's right.
While excluding light-skinned Berbers, who are African as well.
Now, are you talking about light-skinned as in Khoisan Bushmen, or are you talking about Germanic or European white Berbers? There's a difference. They're not indigenous to Africa. They're Africans now, don't get me wrong. They do have the genes, but otherwise they are mixed with Europeans. That does not make you indigenous. So I guess now we're going to forget all about the Moorish conquest of Spain, the 500 years. About the Romans, hear all about Al Mansur bringing 3,000 Christian white slaves back to Africa. We're going to forget all about the slave trade being 1,000 years old before the Europeans got there. About the Arabs, hear all about the fact that the slave trade during that time sold Africans, Arabs, and whites. We're going to forget all about that, and we're going to go with your theory that they are indigenous to Africa without checking all the background facts against the genetics, right? Even in the genetics, they also come up as having European genes as well as Arab. So they're not indigenous, they're mixed people, okay?
E1B1B1A has its largest concentrations in both Morocco and Somalia, followed by Egypt, Sudan, the rest of the Horn, and Berber territories, and then diffusion to Europe. E1B1B1B has its largest concentrations in Berber territories, followed by other Saharan countries, including Lower Egypt and the Sudan. E1B1B1C has its largest concentration in Tunisia and Arabia, followed by Ethiopia, Eritrea, Berber countries, and Arab countries. E1B1B1 only further illustrates how the Berbers, Egyptians, Sudanese, Horn of Africans, and in the case of this gene specifically, also Arabs, are much more interconnected with each other than the rest of the world.
Totally forgot about Schumacher at this point. Okay, if I can recall, Schumacher explained the PN2 marker as being the father of the E haplogroup.
Father to son, son to son. This particular DNA marker here, PN2, is sort of the background, and that's what this means, it's the background of 73% of all of the people in Africa today. 73%.
And on top of this, he forgets about the Bantu expansion. Two different major movements in Africa was the Bantu expansion and the movement of Islam. Now, he goes on to show you these different countries, but here's a 14th century map. Where do those countries exist? Matter of fact, they were so screwed up that they took Ethiopia all the way down to South Africa. And then they had the nerve to push it in the
So there were mixtures, obviously. Civilizations draw all sorts of things into them, and the Egyptians did not remain homogeneous.
Did not remain homogeneous or was heterogeneous to start with?
Now, he posed this question, but did he answer this question? No. He didn't say anything about them being heterogeneous or homogeneous after that question. He went on to attack Dr. Ivan Ben Sertima like he had some type of credibility. Now, anybody will tell you that there was no mass migration into Africa during the time of early Egyptian settlement. There were none. He wants to say that the Levant, or it was the Levant, and it was but you can't say that because, first of all, there's no evidence of a mass migration from the Levant. None whatsoever. Now, you claim to listen to Schumacher, but now you're going to ignore what Schumacher said and you're going to bring your own ideologies and twisted views into play. Okay, well, let's see exactly what Schumacher said about this situation.
At this time, at the beginning of the Neolithic, of course, though, in some cases come from the Near East. Wheat and barley agriculture, as well as the domesticated ovicaprins, the goat and sheep. There's no question because there are no wild species of those to be cultivated in Africa, and there's no question that that's where they came from. However, just because those crops came from there doesn't mean that there was a mass migration. This is a point of contention in some circles. There's no indication of the kind of mass movement that you see, say, from the Near East into Southern Europe, of a total revolution in lifestyle. Rather, what you seem to have is local people who adopt one sort of resource strategy. Also, there's some other linguistic things that I'll talk about later, but So there is no mass movement, or there's no archaeological evidence for this that would support a simple demic diffusion.